Hello, cyber ladies and net gentlemen. Welcome to Archive Memories. This is a complete Netrunner retrospective podcast hosted by me, Aaron, and our co-host here, Isaac or Nyan. I don't know, what do you want me to call you on this thing?
Let's go with Isaac.
All right, I'll be Aaron, you be Isaac, and we won't use our net monikers.
Yeah.
All right, Nyan, or Isaac, whatever I'm going to call you on this show.
That fucking asshole that's on the other end of the mic.
Exactly. Do you want to explain to our listeners what that means by a complete Netrunner retrospective?
Yeah, so basically we're going to be starting with the core set and just going in chronological order of release right up until the point when Netrunner died. We're not covering the Nisei garbage because fan-made cards do not count.
Those don't exist. They're not real.
It's fake. It's all fake in your imagination.
It's all just a dream that we will wake up from soon enough.
When we wake up, will Netrunner be alive again, or am I just going to be real depressed all over again?
Well, I guess we'll just have to find out.
Damn.
Anyways, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to go over each card in a fair amount of detail, discussing, what's good and bad about the cards, where they fit in the meta, so on and so forth. We'll try not to take a insane amount of time on each card and our analysis and discussion of it, but we'll be doing our best not to skim over even the shittiest of cards. We will try to give even the cards that never saw the light of day from the card box, their time to shine, at least here on this show.
Yeah, even Net Shield gets its day in court.
Even Net Shield, may even get me playing some devil's advocate for it. Who knows? After we discuss the cards, we'll slap an arbitrary rating on them and then put them in a tier list that, the three people that listen to this show can take a look at and giggle at.
Yeah, but when you send us your hate mail, address it to Kika, because Aaron, I won't be reading it.
That is fair. Address it to Kika, address it to Aaron, address it to anybody you want to, because I also will not read it. All right, well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on a very interesting enough card. Pretty pleased to see that this is card number 1 of the core set, given that you and I have some feelings on this card.
Not only card number 1 of the core set, card number 1 of the entire game. This is the best card that was ever printed. And I'm going to go ahead and read it because, fuck you, that's why. So, card number 1 is Noise, Hacker Extraordinaire. This is a runner identity with the subtype of Gmod. His deck size is 45 with 15 influence and 0 link. His card text is, whenever you install a virus program, the corp trashes the top card of R&D. Flavor text, watch this. It'll be funny. And you know what, Noise? You're right. It was funny.
Was it, though? Was it really funny? I do agree with your initial analysis that why did they bother making other cards? They should have just stopped at this one. The core set should have just been this card in a little envelope, really.
I would have been on board with it.
I'm sure that you would have. So, to go ahead and kick off our discussion on, the special boy Noise, the hacker extraordinaire himself. Number 1, Neon. Why is this card stupid RNG bullshit that never should have been printed?
So it's stupid RNG bullshit that never should have been printed because you trash the top card of R&D. You don't know what it is. The corp doesn't know what it is, excluding, talking about it in a vacuum at any rate. But generally, nobody knows what that top card is. We're just throwing it in the garbage. It could be an agenda to win the game. It could be nothing. And a number of effects led to this potentially ending games or potentially whiffing and being a big nothing burger. So it's totally random. It's just milling cards off the top of the deck.
Which is always good, because you have to assume that the corporation that you're playing against, or I guess the person that you're playing against, put cards that they wanted in their deck.
Yeah, usually that's the way it happens, though in the core set, there were definitely cards that were there only because you had to have them.
Sure, I think this was a completely fine, you know, I mean, I don't know. I have problems just with the design itself. I mean, I think one of the reasons why and I'd argue a lot of other people, really kind of were so enamored by Netrunner was not just the base mechanics in and of itself, of course, which were incredible. Just in regards to, the asymmetry, turn structure, the click system, so on and so forth. But was also how good a job the game did at mitigating the classic issue of RNG when it comes to a constructed deck card game.
Yeah, yeah. It did that because most of the important parts of the game came from decisions made by the corp and decisions made by the runner. And sure, sometimes your deck would fuck you over, but even if it did, if you made the right decisions, you could still pull out a win.
Right. And so my problem with the design philosophy behind this card, or at least the perceived design philosophy of this card, is fuck that. Just trash something. Who knows what it is? Maybe it's an agenda. Maybe it's not. We'll see.
All right, so let me just go ahead and play the Anarch's advocate here a little bit. So, for one, this identity is, in my experience, more about pressure than it is about milling. It's not so much that it matters what is being milled. It's the fact that you're milling it. You're creating another problem that the corp is going to have to deal with. Normally, as the corp, you're constructing a board state for the runner to have to get through. You're putting up ice, you're putting up servers to score agendas out of. Noise creates an additional problem that the corp otherwise would not have to deal with. To that end, noise is disruptive. Noise is good at taking a corp with a solid, effective game plan and ruining it by way of now they have other problems they need to solve, which they weren't necessarily built around.
I mean, this is all true, but at the end of the day, it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth that you're just randomly chucking shit into the trash, because the opponent's card says that you have to.
Like, there's no question that there's RNG elements to this, and there was enough belly aching about noise, or it caused enough of an issue in playtesting that the second cycle gave us a card more or less specifically built to deal with the noise as an issue.
And we'll get to that, as we kind of bring up our further questions in regards to, this card's place in the meta and what effect it had on it. But before we get to that, I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, why is this card good? Because it's an effect that you force the corporation player to do, which is rare in Netrunner. They don't have a choice; they can't avoid it. Yep. There's nothing to be done about when noise installs the virus program.
You know what you do when noise installs a virus? You cry. You cry to yourself about it.
Right, and there's just nothing that you can do, no matter how much belly aching you do in the game itself. You're going to trash that top card R&D, and it's going to suck. But anyway, moving on to our next question in regards to noise. Isaac, how do you play with and against this card?
Okay, well, let's start with playing with this card. For the obvious point is you need to cram your deck as full of viruses as you possibly can. Noise is just a simple conditional ability. You install a virus, you trash a card. Do you want to be getting use out of your identity? Install lots of viruses. To that end, when I used to build noise decks, at least half of the deck would wind up being virus programs in an ideal world.
Sure.
Because I want to be constantly drawing them, constantly installing them, using them, reinstalling them, and just generally making life awful.
Just generally being a dickhead.
Yeah, a dickhead with multicolored hair.
Now, one of the things that kind of made this identity, I would say, I guess, a little more interesting and a little less stingy in the core set was that there was not a lot of viruses to work with, really, in the core set, but then additionally in the first little bit of the Genesis cycle as well.
Yeah, so in the core set, you've got something like
I want to say
three
9. I think
viruses.
9 you could run total if you run 3 of medium, parasite, and data sucker. I want to say,
Right. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's all you can manage. So,
which means the ability fires 9 times. Which okay, or at best 9 times, right? Um, Realistically, you're probably going to fire it.
you also have deja vus. So if you have three of those, then that's adding six more potentially on top of that.
That is true. Did forget about deja vu, which I reckon probably a lot of people ended up forgetting about later on in the game's life cycle.
Yeah, a lot of people did, but not me. I
So
love it.
realistically, right, if you have the 9 copies and then say you're running 3 copies of deja vu, you're probably going to get this ability to fire in an average game 7 or 8 times. That sound fair?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds about right, particularly early on when card draw is a complicated question.
Sure. And that also sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, it's a substantial effect. You're taking out maybe on the upper end 20% of your opponent's deck.
Sure. And once hit archives, chances are you probably at least got an agenda or two.
And getting an agenda or two out of what's essentially your runner ID is not a bad thing. That's really not terrible.
I mean, I would argue that it's very good.
And that's not counting what I consider to be the maybe the more useful in more situations part of noise is that you're trashing other cards that your opponent needs. If for example, I'm playing noise and I've trashed 8 cards to this point and I decide it's time to check archives and I run and I get in and they flip over those 8 cards and there's 2 economy cards and 6 pieces of ice. I'm ecstatic about that because what that means is there are 6 fewer pieces of ice in their deck in their hand and 2 fewer economy cards. And what's that doing to the numbers? How flooded is their hand? How dense are the agendas in their deck? And are they going to be scratching and clawing to find the pieces they need to not be poor and defend themselves?
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be putting the court player in a hole one way or another.
Right.
You're going to be getting something that they wanted, kind of going back to my initial statement that, chances are when they're building a deck, they're probably putting cards that they wanted in there. May not be the case for the core set, of course, like you had mentioned. But this could definitely be a devastating ability, and certainly was a devastating ability. Spoilers for future discussions. When we were midway through the game's life cycle.
All right. So, Aaron, how then as the corp do you look to play against noise?
Well, in a pre-Jackson Howard world, you cry. In a post-Jackson Howard world, you pop Jackson Howard.
Just like that.
Yeah, this is a difficult one to deal with because, kind of as I said, I mean, this is an ability, right? So you can't prevent it. So there's really nothing that you can do. I would say, proactively, right, to avoid the ability itself. Of course, it's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
Now, as far as how you play against it or around it as a corp, I mean, generally, ice archives, right? You see noise, get some ice over archives. Additionally, right, because you know that if you're playing against noise, he's going to be running your data suckers. He's going to be running, support cards for the fixed strength breakers, especially in the core set or early in the game's meta. But really, ice archives and whatever recursion you may have access to. Now, of course, this show's namesake, archived memories, did exist in the core set, so that could help. Especially if an agenda got sniped or one of your, really pertinent econ cards. You can always archive memories them back.
Sure.
But I think really the simple answer is to ice archives and try to put pressure on noise to have to play the game outside of just milling cards and checking archives, right? You want to get remotes down, that you want to make noise check. Me being a rush player, would of course try to immediately get a scoring server down and just start shoving agendas and basically dare him to mill me out as far as agenda points go before I win the game.
The old race to the finish.
Race to the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. All right. So how do you act then as the corp if that's basically your game plan, but because you're running against noise, you're just not drawing your pieces?
I mean, at that point, it depends. All of it depends on the kind of deck that you're running, right?
Sure.
I think that corpse, like really all the corpse but HB probably don't feel as bad against noise because they're probably packing ways to damage noise. So with Jinteki, you're probably not feeling too bad in regards to just traps and snares, especially if we're talking post honor and profit. I mean, you've got Shikyus and shocks and things in the archives. You're probably happy that noise is trashing your deck. And then, with Wayland and NBN, right? If you're running a tag and bag deck, he definitely has the ability to mill those pieces, but if you're running any sort of recursion, you're probably feeling not too bad about your kill conditions against him.
Yeah, I would say you're onto something with that. As an avid noise player, the kill decks were always a big concern because you're very reliant on a lot of the cards in your deck. That means you're wanting to play lots of cards, which means keeping a full hand and strong survivability while you're doing all of that becomes a difficult dance to play as noise. So when you're up against someone who's looking to kill you, it can be very difficult to maintain the balance between playing everything you need to apply pressure and get your win conditions going, as well as not setting yourself up for murder.
Yeah, I do want to say that and I guess we'll at this point I think shift the discussion into the next question because I think that is kind of where we're headed with these comments, which is how did this card affect the overall meta of the game, if at all? Which I will go ahead and answer myself to start with and say that I think that the advent of noise and noise shop decks, the original solitaire cancer runner deck, the proto degeneracy deck.
Granted.
Really, because tag and bag and kill decks were almost in a lot of scenarios the only really viable option, of course outside of fast advance too. But I think a lot of the degenerate corp decks that kind of ended up existing or being so prevalent in the meta were almost as a direct response to noise being so fucking cancerous during that post-Genesis cycle kind of part of the game.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. So and even going beyond that, because that was a huge impact on the game for really the first year and change of the game's life cycle, was noise continued to be a problem that corporations had to account for. Because at any point, you could be playing in an event and run into a noise deck, and if you just didn't have the tools to deal with it, then you could spontaneously lose. It mandated playing and considering the game in a different fashion than the average runner. If you're playing against most criminals, then you're playing an economic balance game. If you're playing against shapers, it's also much an economics balance game, but with some different facets to it there. But with noise, the paradigm shifts. because it's no longer necessarily about, do I have the money to do the things I need to do, and does the runner have the money to do the things they need to do? Money might have nothing to do with it, and that makes it a much more difficult kind of a game to read.
Yeah, it's less not as quantifiable, I guess.
Yeah.
The effect that you're going to suffer, as it may be with other, really a lot of other runner identities, and really once the personal workshop, and then new viruses coming out, and then just the noise shop kind of coming into existence. That was kind of the first, maybe not the first, but that was one of the first runner archetypes that you could not afford to not keep in mind when you were bringing a corp deck to a tournament.
Right.
You had to play with noise shop in consideration. Chances are you were going to play one, if not a couple, noise shop decks. So you had to pack a corp that was going to be able to win, even though noise was trashing half your deck.
Yes, correct.
And like I said, as far as the game's overall meta, I do just want to point out, I know you love noise so much, but kind of like how a lot of people point at the Beatles inventing heavy metal because of the heavy bass line on Helter Skelter. Noise invented degenerate solitaire runner decks.
All right, let's be honest. The degenerate solitaire was coming one way or another. All it took was for some cards to be printed that were capable of it, for that bandwagon to start. And on the flip side of it, like, to kind of expose myself here a little bit, I entered the game after Noise Shop was on the downhill slope. When I first bought into the game, it was up to Creation and Control. And so a couple months after I started getting into the game, Jackie Howard was released. And so Noise Shop more or less started disappearing around that point. So when everyone else was breathing a sigh of relief to say, oh, thank God Noise Shop is gone, that's when I was making shopless noise decks and couldn't have been more excited about him as an identity.
That's fair. That's interesting. I had forgotten that you had kind of gotten into the game kind of so much later compared to me. Not that I had gotten into it right after launch or anything. I want to say that 3 or 4 packs in the Genesis cycle were out when I had bought into the game.
But a different sort of it was going on.
Yes, I was there. I was there when the strength of ice failed. No, I was there when fucking Noise Shop first came to be a thing, and it sucked. It was terrible. I hated it because I like ice, and I like runners having to interact with my board state.
No, that's entirely fair. And because I missed out on much of the Noise Shop era, I don't harbor the same ill feelings towards Noise. My original experience with Noise, if we can meander slightly, was the second game of Netrunner I ever played. I was playing like a core HB deck against my brother, and he played Noise, and there was no personal workshop involved in it. It was just pretty vanilla Noise, and he devastated my asshole with it, and I immediately wanted to do that to other people.
You immediately wanted to inflict that suffering upon others.
Correct.
Well, you know what? That's fair. So I think we should start to move on. I mean, ultimately, Noise, undeniably great identity, undeniably had an undeniable effect on the course that the game took as a whole.
Cool.
Probably in the top 5 game-defining cards, if you want to.
I would say so.
If you want to go that route. But so now we'll move on to our quick flavor discussion. So Noise's art has always kind of bugged me.
It's not great. Like the vanilla art isn't great, but much of the art in the early life cycle of the game was in a more kind of cartoony, almost comic book style than a lot of the art that came later.
Yeah, and a lot of it was reused from the board game and from that other fucking Android game that I can never remember the name of. if I
Yes.
remember correctly.
But, in defense of my boy Noise here, if you've ever seen the promo art for Noise, the alternate art ID that got released for some things later on, it is gorgeous and I love it. And it's so much better than the normal art.
I do like the alt full art Noise. I do have a few. I think one or a few copies of it in my collection, and it is far better. I do agree. But I do think that his ability, for all the effects, good and bad, that it had on the game, is quite thematic. I guess with an anarch, just kind of wanting to, wreak destruction upon a corporation with, no regard for what it is they're destroying.
Yeah, agreed. It's flavorful in that regard. It fits the whole anarchist theme of being the hacker extraordinaire and installing virus programs, which those programs themselves, I think most of them were quite thematic and very satisfying to use, and it all played together in a way that was what I think a lot of us fell in love with when we started playing Netrunner.
Right. For all his problems, Noise is definitely the kind of runner and the kind of identity that you want in the core set to draw people to that kind of universe and that faction.
Agreed.
Okay. So let's slap a rating on this bad boy. Noise, or excuse me, Nyan, what do you rate Noise?
Noise gets 5 virus tokens out of 5 from me.
That's fair. I am, just because I hate him so much, gonna have to dock a point. I'm gonna give him a 4 out of 5, simply because I hate him and everything that he stands for.
I'll be honest, I was expecting you to give him a 2 just to spite me and make me angry.
No, this is it's just one of those cards where no matter how much you hate it, it's good, and you just really can't argue against that. But I'm not giving it a 5. Fuck giving it a 5. I'm giving it a 4 just because I hate it. All right. So that took a little longer than anticipated, but Noise. The first identity in the set and what he did for the game, and did to the game.
Sure. And one of the biggest and most expansive identities that were ever released. Add that to the fact that identities have, a little bit more to cover than the average card anyway.
That's fair. We'll go ahead and move on to number 2 in the set. Number 2 in the game. And that is a card that we touched on briefly in our discussion prior about Noise, Deja Vu. I will go ahead and take the reins here, and that it is a 2 credit to play event. It is in the Anarch faction. It costs 2 influence. And it reads, add 1 card or up to 2 virus cards from your heap to your grip. So, Neon, why is this card kind of forgotten toward the end of the game's life cycle?
I think action economy was the problem that it ran into late in the game's life cycle. I think that's part of it, but I think the real reason was a little bit more expansive, because anytime you play Deja Vu, you have to play it and you pay 2 credits, and then you get a card from your heap. But then you have to also go ahead and play that card. So it's decidedly a tempo hit to use in a few different ways. But for much of the game's life cycle, it was in basically every Anarch deck. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, the virus cards were great. You had Parasite, which was the most common thing that people would target with Deja Vu, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But more Parasites are always a good thing. They're always going to wind up in your garbage heap at some point. So recycling those is great. Slightly later on, we saw this card used to recycle account siphons.
Boy, were those the days.
Boy, were those the days. So it's versatile and powerful, but Account Siphon and Parasite were cards that disappeared later in the game's life cycle.
They did. They were not a thing anymore. And so I think that's a fair assessment of kind of deja vu's falling off, and that you're absolutely right. Really, in kind of the core set and early onset of the game environment, this card really could just read, spend 2 credits and a click to get, up to 2 parasites back from your heap. Because that's pretty much what it was for. Was to get your parasite back after you destroyed, you know, after you destroyed a poor victor with it. Though I
Let's be
guess
honest,
playing,
Victor got what he deserved.
yeah, and I guess honestly, if you're playing this card out of Anarch, you're not trashing the victor because you got Yogg.
True.
But yeah, really, in a world where Parasite and Account Siphon are not around anymore, what do you really get back with Deja Vu, right?
I don't think you need that much. Like, Deja Vu is basically putting card slots into running more of the same card, more of some other card that you have in your deck. And it's mostly only worth it if it's such a high impact card that you have few copies of, Account Siphon, or if you're getting a good exchange rate on it, Viruses, and things like Parasite, where those 2 credits are absolutely worth killing 2 more pieces of ice.
Right. And then we got kind of better alternatives later on in the game anyway.
Sure.
Because once I want to say that it was in creation and control. Once we got Same Old Thing, I think that Deja Vu was kind of out of a lot of decks because that was when really recurring Account Siphon was chiefly what wanted to be done with runner recursion. And so, Same Old Thing, a lot more appealing for a deck that's wanting to recur Account Siphons.
Sure.
Though I guess if you're running Account Siphon out of Anarch, which of course was not unheard of, really then at that point you run this and Same Old Thing, and I mean you got potentially 9 copies of Account Siphon to play.
Yeah, I've never done that to anyone.
Yeah, you would be completely unaware of that strategy. Don't even know why I brought it up to you because it's so alien of a concept to you.
Yeah, I really don't understand it. I don't know what you're talking about at this point.
But yeah, and so, but I think those sorts of decks, like Andy Sucker, that, version 2 of the, Degenerate Runner saga. I guess we'll say chapter 2 of the Degenerate Runner saga. Really was going to slot Same Old Thing, right? Save influence.
Yeah.
Don't have to pay the money. Though, I mean, granted, you do have to pay the extra clicks, We could get into a whole, try hard, sweaty neckbeard discussion about click compression and click economy. But I'd actually rather die than do that. So
Fair enough.
So with that, how do you play with and against this card? I think we kind of already touched on how you play with it, right? I mean, you recur your parasites, recur your Account Siphons.
Pretty much. Yeah. On occasion, you might pull back a Data Sucker or a Medium or something if you've got a specific use case for it. But other than that, you're pulling the highest value Viruses and huge tempo power cards like Account Siphon. That's basically it.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see a case being made for last click hit an Ichi, something like that, needing to go fish back your Yogg or whatever. But for the most part, really it's just going to be based on the game you're playing, right? In general circumstances, you're going to get your Account Siphon and your Parasite back, and then in all other cases, just whatever happened to get trashed along the way that maybe you didn't want to. Playing against Jinteki, this can kind of be extra hit points too, because it can give you 2 virus cards. So, the Deja Vu turning from 1 card into 2, I could see being relevant against a Jinteki kill deck.
All right, so if we're playing against it, this is pretty simple. It's an event, so there's not a lot you can really do about it. All you do is you count them. You count how many have been used, and you factor them into how many parasites and Account Siphons and other bullshit you're going to have to deal with. Just be aware of it.
Yeah, you just add it to your math. When you go and try to shove that agenda in your scoring server, you include the 2 credits and the Deja Vu and getting whatever your most hated card back from archives that's currently, or not archives, from the runner's heap that's currently in there, as part of your math for the server.
Right.
But yeah, not much else you can do about it. I mean, later on, of course, in the game's what do you call it? Life cycle. You had some identities that could maybe deal with it a little better. Specifically, Chronos Project. Where you get to choose what you snipe out of the runner's hand. Obviously, you're always going to pick this as opposed to any other card because this card will just get it back.
Yeah.
But all fringe cases. So how did this card affect the meta, if at all?
I would say maybe the most interesting thing meta-wise that this card did, because the surface and obvious use case of it was just recurring more viruses. This is clearly the primary purpose that was in mind when it was created. But the account siphon thing that we mentioned before basically enabled the entirety of the Anarch account siphon recursion archetype that became very popular later on. Because if you're playing Anarch and you're wanting to run account siphon, you're looking at probably at least 8 influence and probably 12 of your influence spent on that. It's a huge amount. It's a huge investment. And if you're going to do that, you want to be getting maximal value for that. And so that means running 3 same old things and 3 deja vus. So you're now looking at 9 account siphons instead of 3. And the extra 3 that you get from deja vu is huge. It really cannot be understated how much of a difference this made for that archetype. It arguably made Anarch better at account siphoning than the criminals were.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty spot on analysis there. I mean, really, for all intents and purposes, the existence of this card enabled that archetype to really be a thing.
Yes, agreed.
Because do you even try to run siphon spam out of Anarch without this card?
No, it's not worth the influence at that point.
Right. So, yeah. So I would say that this had a pretty hefty effect on the meta. At least during the time that siphon spam was plaguing everybody. But I guess with that, we'll just move right on to the flavor discussion, which this is one that I kind of wanted to talk about as far as flavor goes. Just because, what the fuck is this picture?
No idea. It's a Bioroid remembering something. I got nothing, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clearly not like a regular human. I mean, he's like silver and has a definitely at least one weird robot eye. Really, 2 weird robot eyes. Just
pretty sure that's also a weird robot nose. We're talking weird robot man here.
Yeah, he's got a weird robot tumbler nose. Because it's like grayer than the rest of his face.
This is a case where the mechanic and the flavor do not clearly mesh in any particular way.
Yeah, this is one where the flavor of the card was definitely an afterthought to the effect. They definitely drew up this card and were like, all right, this is, we want this card to do this. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the flavor of it? And they're like, put a robot guy on there. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're like, what art do we have in the unused art folder? I got this robot guy.
Fuck it, put it on there. It'll work.
All right, ship it. All right. But yeah, glad we're aligned on there because I've always looked at this card and it's just been like, it's just not really there for me.
Agreed.
All right, let's slap a rating on this bad boy. I'll go ahead and start since I let you, rate our boy Noise first. This is a little bit of a tough one for me. I'm gonna rate it a 3. I do think that it was a great card for a long time. That fell out of favor just because other cards got printed that kind of filled that space, and then cards ended up getting banned and rotated. That kind of made it less useful. But also because the flavor is just so like not there, that's gonna dock a point for me. So I'm gonna stick it at a 3.
I don't think that's unfair. I'm gonna give it a 4. Just because some of the things it did do to the meta turned out to be very defining, enabling the archetypes that we talked about before. and just personal bias for the fact that this interacted very strongly with my two favorite runner decks that I ever played. So I have to give it a little love for that.
That's fair. All right, well, moving on. We have number 3 of the core set of the game, which is Demolition Run. Why don't you narrate the effects of Demolition Run?
All right. Demolition Run is a 2-credit to play Anarch event that costs 2 influence. It has the subtypes Run and Sabotage. It says Run HQ or R&D. During that run, you may pay 0 credits to trash any card you are accessing, even if it has no trash cost.
Ooh, damn! You're reading the new weird Nisei errata of whatever the card is. Because that's definitely not what the card originally said.
Shit, you're right. I'm reading the wrong thing. All right, let me reread it with the correct.
Just look at the image. Just don't pay attention to any of that text.
Make a run on HQ or R&D. You may trash at no cost any cards you access, even if the cards cannot normally be trashed.
All right, so Neon, why is this card so weird?
All right, it's very weird, right? Because you look at this on the surface and you're like, okay, I can trash anything. And we just keep in mind, we are the two people who just got done discussing why noise is ridiculous for trashing random cards. We're talking about trashing cards that I'm looking at and accessing, and I can just throw them away for free. That's what you're talking about. This sounds ridiculous. I certainly thought so when I first, started playing the game. Then I started putting Demolition Run into decks, and you know what? It doesn't do what it claims to do. Like this is the used car salesman of run events. He's here telling you that this car can do all of these amazing things, that it runs like a dream, so on and so forth, and then you take it out for a drive and one of the wheels falls off.
Really, it turns out that this car cannot fit very much spaghetti in it at all.
3 spaghetti at most.
Right. Yeah, so definitely agree with you there in that this card does not really do what it says. Or it does. Really, it should have like a big asterisk after the card text, right? Because the circumstances where you are really and truly going to get the full benefit from this effect are rare, we will say.
Because when you look at it, a lot of things actually have to line up, right? Okay, for one, you have to have the extra credits to make the run. It's costing you 2 more. Now, later on in the game's life cycle, this is less of an issue, but we'll gloss over that for now. Second, you need to be making a run on HQ or R&D, so it's a little bit limited in that regard. You can't just go and trash anything in a remote server, though you probably would prefer to do it this way anyway. Then you have to actually get in to that server. And once you get in, you have to have enough extra card accesses that this is really doing enough damage to be worthwhile. And then you need to hit enough cards that you want to trash with Demo Run that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. That's a lot of conditions.
Yeah, that's a lot of shit that has to go right, so to speak. Now I will say that I have seen this card used to some good effect. In my days.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess we'll get to it later in the discussion, but there were definitely some deck archetypes that utilized this card, to some effect.
Yes, like it's not a terrible card. It's a card that requires everything to go its way in order for it to be useful. And slotting that sort of a card into your deck is a gamble.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and move on to the, how do you play with this card? I mean, really, it goes without saying that this is a card that you pair with a fat medium.
the fattest medium, like 3 C's thick.
Yeah, like the thickest medium that you could possibly find. The thickest medium that money could buy is what you need to pair this card with. And this, now, the fat medium did definitely get some support cards later in the game. Whatever the fucking Anarch box was called. What was that called?
Anarch box.
Yeah, the Anarch and fucking what you call it, big box.
Oh, Order and Chaos.
Order and Chaos, that's the one. There were definitely some support cards that helped get a medium pretty fat. With, I want to say, like Hive Mind was in that box.
Yes.
That definitely enabled getting a nice chunky medium online, which by extension enabled this card to be able to do things. But as far as playing with it, really, you wait 3 years and then you play it with those cards.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or you just play against a person who subscribes to a religion that absolutely forbids purging virus counters, and then you use it against them.
Yeah, I'm not sure which religion that is, but I'd like to join.
Yeah, so you join that religion, and then I guess you join that religion, convert your friend to that religion, then you play against him, and then you demolition run him with a fucking 12 stacked medium.
That is the point at which he'll realize Satan led him astray.
Right. As far as how you play against this card, you don't, I guess.
On the one hand, you don't. On the other hand, you do it by doing all of the things you would normally do against all of the support that this card needs.
Yes, you play a normal game of Netrunner.
Right. And then it doesn't go off.
Right. You play ice in front of your servers. You fast advance your bullshit. You put traps in the places. And I mean, yeah, really just the standard play style of any of the 4 corporations is a completely serviceable counter to this card.
And therein is perhaps part of the problem.
Right. So we'll just go ahead and move on to the next kind of question here, which is how did this card affect the meta, if at all?
It just super didn't. Nobody ever ran it. Nobody ever cared. It was just it was the thing Timmy would pull out sometimes, and then he'd get a sad look on his face because mostly it didn't fire. Once in a while, he'd pull it off, and you'd all have a good laugh about it. But that didn't change the meta.
I mean, I could overall agree that it didn't really have a wide-reaching or really powerful, I guess, if you want to put it that way, effect on the meta. But I will say, playing Demo's advocate here, that I absolutely saw some people in my local play group run the fucking post-Order and Chaos, like Hive Mind, Surge, fucking what's that other thing? Infect or whatever. Oh yeah, Incubator, absolutely Incubator. But then what's that resource? That like every
virus breeding ground.
Yeah, virus breeding grounds. Just all that shit. And then what was the? I feel like there was a card that prevented purging of virus counters, or like had some sort of defense against purging virus counters. Maybe not. I mean, I think the idea was that you were able to get everything fucking. You were just able to shit a million virus counters onto it, like during your turn, like to where they couldn't purge.
Sure.
And I absolutely saw that deck used to some pretty devastating effect, and like some pretty hilarious situations where they just like crashed the corpse whole deck. Now granted, you just win by scoring agendas in that situation anyway, so who cares? Like, why even run the demolition run?
Right.
But goddamn it was funny.
Sure. I will certainly grant you that this card was hilarious.
So let's move on to the flavor discussion. This is another weird one for me. I don't know, how you feeling on this guy?
I mean, why is a demo run specifically blowing up this Bioroid? I don't know.
Yeah. What is blowing the bio right up?
I
Like,
mean,
is
something's coming out of the back of or going into the back of his head, but more than that, it's like, eh.
looks like he got shot in the head with like a gun, like a cyber gun.
Cyber gun. See, Demolition Run, I think, would have been better if you just had Cyber Wesley Snipes with a gun.
Yeah. And really don't even name it Demolition Run, just name it Cyber Gun. I mean, flavor text is cool though. You ever set something on fire just to watch it burn?
It's very anarch. Flavor text good. The image more Wesley Snipes out of 10.
Yeah. Like the art is actually good. I do like the art.
There's the connection.
Yeah, I just don't really know that this to me screams, like burning down a whole fucking, HB server farm.
Because that's what you think about when you think about demo run. You think about burning half of R&D in just one glory run.
Right. And so in that, the flavor should be like somebody fucking setting a bomb, at the server room or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, let's slap a rating on this guy. I don't know. We'll let you go first here.
I'm gonna give my boy Demolition Run 2 stars. I'd kind of like to give him more because I do like this card, but I perpetually would be like, I'm gonna run Demo Run in this deck, and then I'd play it a couple times and I'm like, I'm gonna cut Demo Run out of this deck. It just never got off the ground for me.
Yeah, Demo Run I want to say is a pretty perennial first cut after you like play a deck for like the first time, Perennial first on the chopping block. But ultimately I'm glad it exists. I think it's a cool effect. I think it's a fun effect. And I think one of the things that you have to consider too is not every card is meant to be good, and not every card really has to be good per se.
That's fair.
Sometimes being fun is enough, especially if you're trying to make a game that's fun. But ultimately, I'm gonna have to mirror your rating and give Demo Run a 2.
Our first agreement. Let's hope it's the last.
Yeah, right. All right. Next on our list here is classic card. Honestly, I mean, is that too much to say? An all-time classic?
Definitely not. An all-time classic is exactly what this is. This is Stairway to Heaven, the card.
Oh yeah. Except it doesn't suck. But we'll get to that later. Stim Hack. It is a 0 to play run event, which is a pretty important subtype for the game and just in general. But you make a run and you gain 9 credits, which you may use only during this run. After the run is completed, suffer 1 brain damage, cannot be prevented, and return to the bank any of the 9 credits not spent. And it is a measly 1 influence out of the Anarch faction. So yeah. Tell me, why is this card so classic?
All right, so this card does it all, if I may. For one, it's got the action economy because you're making a run off of playing it and you're gaining 9 credits at the same time. So those two things have now been combined into one thing, which is better. This is more money than you're going to get if you played 2 sure gambles and then made a run for 1 click instead of 3. That's awesome on the surface. Now, later, you suffer a brain damage and you can't use the 9 credits anywhere else. So those are the downsides. But interesting downsides make a card more fun as well. When you draw Stim Hack, your pulse goes up a little bit where you're like, oh, I've got this option now. But if it doesn't work out the way I want it to, then I get my fucking brain eaten for nothing. That's cool.
Exactly. So and that's a great way to put Stim Hack, right? Stim Hack is just a cool card, both in effect and in the just kind of the aura surrounding it.
Yeah.
Because you are getting fucking stimmed up to make a Hail Mary in many, many, many classic circumstances of Netrunner. Probably game deciding run on this remote server. They thought that they thought they were cheeky stacking that sixth ice on that server and then clicking for two. They thought that you were a pussy. Just to put it bluntly.
It was over.
They thought that you were a dumb pussy and that they were gonna score that fucking accelerated beta test behind that 6 pieces of ice. But then not on my boy, not on my stims watch, not on the watch of my stims that I have fucking injected and hopped myself up all crazy on. What stims are they? I don't fucking know, but they make me better at hacking. I know that. They make my shit cheaper to use.
And really, that's all you need. I think the thing you hit on there, which is the real reason why this card is a classic, is that the high drama game deciding moments in so many games revolved around this card. So we all have those memories associated with it. When we think about Stim Hack, we think about looking at that stupid 6 ice deep server and just punching the button that says, fuck it, we're going in.
Right, we are going in, and there's no turning back. Because fuck the brain damage. Fuck my brain. I'm getting that agenda.
Fuck my brain, exactly.
And I do think that this is an interestingly designed card because I definitely felt this way out of the core set in my, early baby, fucking smooth brain Neanderthal Netrunner days. Was that this is a card that a new player looks at and it's like, ugh, why would I do that?
Yeah, but it's great.
Right. It's really good. It is great. And the thing that a lot of newer players don't understand is that at the end of the day, no cost is too great if it gets you that last 2 agenda points.
Exactly. If I'm at 1 card in hand, or if I'm at 0, if I'm at 1 card in hand, and that 1 card is Stim Hack, but I know those last 2 points are in that server, it does not matter that I die the moment I jack out of that run because I've already won and I'm a legend.
Exactly. I won the game as soon as those 2 points hit my score area. And even if it's not going to win you the game, is the 1 brain damage going to put you in a worse spot than not only preventing the corp from scoring a 3-pointer, but then you scoring it instead? Absolutely not. You're going to be in a far more favorable game state at that point, than if you didn't play it and didn't take a brain damage.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, how do you play with Stim Hack?
Oh, I mean, one of the nice things about Stim Hack is there's different ways to play it. The obvious one is you use it as a very sudden tempo change. You've just spent all of your money trying to get into R&D and accessing some cards on your last turn. And so the corp on their turn looks across at you and says, you're fucking broke, and I just trashed 3 of your cards from your hand with that snare that you hit, you dumb bitch. You're going to need a turn or 2 to up some tempo and get back into this game. So I'm going to score right now. Little do they know, you got your old buddy fucking Stim Hack in your hand. And so they slap down that agenda and advance it and pass turn. And you just say, up yours, asshole, Stim Hack in there, and it's yours. It's got surprise factor. It's got money. It makes the run. It's the surprise tempo play is really what you want out of this card as the runner.
Right. This is the pocket counter to a scoring window.
Exactly.
That's how you play it with Stim Hack. Is you just hold on to this. You got it in the chamber, just ready for when maybe you hit R&D. Dug 3 deep, came up dry. Sitting on 2 credits, and now the corp thinks, ooh, awesome. Time to shove this prio rec. But no, it is not time for them to shove that prio rec. It's time for them to shove it up their ass, really.
Correct.
Because you're going to go in there and get it. Which really is what makes it so great. Because 9 credits is nothing to sneeze at. That is depending on the breakers that you're using, that's probably 3 ice worth of credits in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
And so being able to just have that kind of power in your hand at the drop of a hat, it just can't be understated how powerful of an effect that is.
Right. The only thing that got in this card's way was just the accelerated economy of later Netrunner, when 9 credits wasn't worth what 9 credits once was. That was the only thing that changed.
That is true. This is definitely another example of a card that was... I don't think it ever stopped being good. I will say that. I think that the game always had a place for Stim Hack in one way or another. But later economy cards definitely made it less appealing.
Yeah.
Runners and Corpse, both, they were just so fucking rich toward the end of the game. 9 credits for a click, almost became standard fare. But how do you play against Stim Hack?
Well, I think the answer is kind of similar to how we were talking about accounting for Deja Vu, only a little bit more pronounced, is you need to be aware of it. You need to be aware of the idea that this is a risk. Because what we talked about with the Stim Hack is that the big thing it does is it takes away scoring windows. And so if you look like you've got a scoring window, you got to think, is Stim Hack going to fuck me out of this scoring window? If the answer is yes, is it worth that risk? Because what if they have it? What if they don't have it? Do I still take advantage of this scoring window? Do I not? It's something you have to consider, but you still have to play the same game. It's just something you have to think about.
Yeah. Stim Hack is definitely one of those cards that the first time that you get hit with it without thinking about it, which definitely won't be the last time that happens, because
No.
we just don't have perfect bioroid brains. But it sticks in your mind that, all right, for the rest of my net running career, I will always ask myself, do they have a Stim Hack? And am I willing to try to shove this agenda with the fact that they have a Stim Hack being a possibility?
Yeah. Or can you bait them with a completely innocent Adonis campaign?
Yes. So that's another thing about Stim Hack. I guess that may be the downside to Stim Hack, right? Is that Stim Hack is only ever as good as the run that you're making.
Yep, it still relies on your brain to make decisions. The same brain that you've just informed that you're going to jam it full of drugs.
Right. The same brain that you're willing to sacrifice 1/5 of, if we're just going to put it that way. That is the brain that you're relying on to use Stim Hack appropriately. This is just a gun that you're pointing at a server, but you still have to be the one to pull the trigger. And ultimately, if it was a bad decision, then Stim Hack was a bad card.
Right. Stim Hack is caveat emptor the card.
I'm going to pretend to know what that means.
Buyer beware.
Okay, gotcha. So how did this card affect the meta, if at all?
Big ways. I mean, for one thing, it was everything that we just talked about, right? Everything that it did to scoring windows, which created really dynamic, really interesting things that happened. So just on the surface, its vanilla effects did that, which is not inconsiderable. Then we go back to our old friend Noise and the Noise Shop.
Oh, I'm going to say that I had forgotten about this interaction. I knew that there was a piece of the whole Noise Shop puzzle that I had not thought of, and that was like, why was that shit so cancerous again? And I had completely forgotten about this.
Yep, because the workshop lets you dump all 9 of those credits into installing all the viruses you want mid-run and then just pulling shit out of archives like an asshole.
What a bunch of bullshit.
So, I'd say that's a pretty sizable bit of impact on the meta.
I would have to agree. I was originally going to say that I don't think this card really actually had an effect on the meta, just because it's always just kind of been what it was, and didn't really, enable per se a lot of other, archetypes or playstyles. But obviously, I'm completely fucking wrong. Because, like I said, I completely forgot about the personal workshop Stim Hack interaction.
Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest meta thing that happened as a result of it. And sometimes that was noise, and sometimes that was inside Shaper, just running Personal Workshop in Shaper and importing some Stim Hacks because they're fucking cheap.
Yep, one influence, baby. But yeah, with that, I think this is one of those sort of cards where um, a little bit of foresight in like the formatting or the wording of the card probably could have went a long way. Because I am certain that the developers of the game never meant or intended Stim Hack to be able to be used that way.
Maybe. I think the interaction was still not that bad. It was more that the corp didn't have the tools to deal with the instant speed of everything that was the big problem there.
I mean, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that one because I think that at Netrunner's worst, it got there because of the design philosophy of, well, it's not the card's problem; it's just that there's not enough other cards to deal with it, which eventually dug a very deep hole that the game sat in for a little while.
To a degree, I think you're right about that in general. I just don't see this particular issue as being a huge one.
Sure. I just think that this may be a decent example of a lack of foresight in the early design of the game.
Yeah, that might be fair.
All right, let's discuss flavor. I think we've kind of already really discussed the flavor of this card.
It's fucking cool, that's what. It's like you just rolled up in your fucking net rig up to this server and you're like, money, brains, who cares about that gay shit? I'm here to win shit, bitch. Let it ride.
I am here to steal agendas. I steal agendas and don't afraid of anything.
Great.
That's really this card in a nutshell. Is, my name is Noise, and I steal agendas and don't afraid of anything. But ultimately, yeah, I think this is one of the perfect examples of what many of us really loved so much about the game. It was kind of a neat, almost perfect intermingling of flavor and function.
Yep, absolutely agreed.
Only question I'll kind of ask and leave as far as the flavor discussion goes is, would this card be improved with some flavor text?
Maybe something might have been nice. Maybe they just didn't want to cram it in on the bottom there, but
yeah, I was gonna say the text on this one is a doozy. So if they did put flavor text, it'd have to be like a pretty short and sweet one. But I don't know. I don't know that the flavor of this card really could be improved. Honestly, I think flavor text maybe could only hurt it.
You might be correct.
All right. Well, let's slap a rating on this bad boy. What are you feeling?
This 5, straight up 5. It's everything I want from Netrunner. It's interesting effects that are things both players need to think about. It's got dramatically powerful things that it can do with serious drawbacks. It's got that perfect marriage you were just talking about between effects in the game and the flavor that goes along with them. 5. I would give it 6 if I could.
Yeah, gonna have to agree with you on this one. Looks like this may be a theme, unfortunately. But I gotta give this one a 5 too. It is classic, and there's just no other way to put it. This is a classic Netrunner card.
Mwah.
Chef's kiss, the cyber chef's kiss. All right. Well, with that, I think we're gonna have to put the brakes on this because we are at just a tad over an hour here. And not too bad for our first outing. We got through 4 cards. Granted, I mean the first literally fucking half of the episode was talking about noise.
I could have talked about noise for the full hour, I'll be honest.
It's true. I had to like make legitimate concerted effort to keep that from happening. But I think at this point we will go ahead and jack out, and we will see you for the next episode where we discuss some other Netrunner cards and how we feel about them.
I look forward to that.
Me too. Godspeed and happy running.